Muted.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Stephen Boulden. I know most of you from 12-3 Marketing. Today we're going to be going over a nice meeting on how to use ACT, best practices and best habits for recording and entering data. The session is being recorded and I will be posting these on YouTube. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can sign up to attend these sessions live using the link in the description below. And without further ado, let's get started. So here on my computer, you should be able to see that I have a copy of the ACT Premium Demo Database open. And this comes with every copy of ACT. Normally, you guys are going to be working in your own company production databases, but if you've ever been curious to go to File and Open Database, you might find some demo databases in there, and that's what we're going to be working with here today. And so when we're looking at an ACT record, ACT is a contact management database, and I know that what I'm going to be doing here, starting with the bare basics, I know a lot of you have been using ACT for many years and might be tuning out at this point, but please keep your attention focused because we will be going into some tips that a lot of people get wrong, even people who have been using ACT for a long time. So as a contact management database, I think it helps to start at a basic level of thinking of ACT kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. I know it's how a lot of people started off with their contact managers before they got a formal CRM system. If you look at all of the contacts in ACT as a list view, you can imagine this being a spreadsheet with rows and columns, with each column representing a different field, such as company, contact, phone, and so on, and each record being a row in the spreadsheet. Within our spreadsheet, we have within our workbook, we have multiple sheets, such as companies, groups, and opportunities. Each of these things in ACT, each of these sheets or tables is known as an entity, and ACT is a database that's made of a relational database between these entities. That's going on well ahead of ourselves, but we're, of course, across the course of the next few weeks, we're going to build up into how all of these different entities integrate and link up with each other. So let's start small. So within ACT, if we have a new contact record here, I'm not going to spend too much time on creating new contacts, but along the top menu toolbar here, there is I have a note. Donna says that she is not seeing my screen. Going to unmute everybody. Is everybody else able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry, Donna, but we will, I'm not sure what's going on with you there. And I will send people back to mute. So when creating a new contact in ACT, this is pretty straightforward, but we can press the New Contact button right up here in the top menu bar. It's got a person's silhouette with a plus sign next to it. This will create us to a new contact screen, and it's always the best practice in ACT. Anytime you create a new contact, maybe you got somebody's business card, maybe you have an email from them, try to fill out as much information as you can. So if we just met Joe Bag of Donuts here, don't just fill out, Joe Bag of Donuts works for the bakery, or make up some fake name here. I mean, maybe if you know what his company is, you can find his company's website. And if you find his company's website is thebakery.com, go ahead and write that in. And on the website, if you find a Contact Us page and you have an address there, then make sure you put that in too. It's always a very good practice to fill in as much contact info as possible every time you get a new contact. It really helps you down the line, even if it requires you to go through and do a little bit of extra digging at the time of. We're going to go ahead and save this up. There is a save button here in ACT. It's a floppy disk. Some people don't even know what those are these days. But the ACT does have an auto-save feature. As you move through an edit field, and even if you go away without saving, ACT will save behind you. Nonetheless, I personally kind of make it a habit to use the save button all the time, to manually prompt that save and kind of refresh the screen. That's kind of enough about creating the contacts, because I want to talk on how we use them in terms of using ACT as your schedule, your calendar, and recording data going forward. When you want to schedule Well, let's talk about the ACT calendar first before we talk about scheduling on it. Along your left navigation panel here in ACT, you'll see a lot of the common links of the main features of ACT that we have down here. We're in the contacts section right now. But if I go under calendar, we will see a schedule of events. Right now I am looking at the work week view, which is showing me a Monday through Friday view from 8 to 5 of all sorts of things that we have on our ACT calendar here for Chris Huffman in the demo database. I can change the view to look at just one day's view or a monthly view and so on. Here's a weekly view that includes Saturday and Sunday. But when I look at these events on the calendar, right now I'm looking at just Chris's calendar. If you want to see other users' calendars, we can use this Select Users button here in ACT. This is a common recurring theme throughout ACT, and I'll show you some other spots that this appears. But there's a Select Users button here that says, whose calendar are we looking at? Suppose this is a bad example in the demo database because there's only one user. It only has Chris Huffman here. But for those of you that might be following along on your own ACT screen, if you press Select Users, you may see other people at your company, and you can view to see their calendars. You can do multiple select. You can see just a select few sets of users, just one, or all of them at once, however you'd like to view it. And it helps for coordinating your team's schedules. It's very good for you to use the ACT calendar because I know that Outlook calendars, many organizations do successfully set them up to synchronize and work together, but I've also seen it in way too many instances where that's not the case. I've seen a lot of companies where each user's schedule and personal calendar for the day is a mystery to everyone else. If you can have everybody using ACT as your calendar, you've got the whole organization on the same page, and all of the data will be entered and stored in ACT forever for everybody's use, and it really builds a powerful database over time. So let's say I want to add a new event to the calendar. If I go back to my contacts section here, I have a few ways I can do this. I'm going to go back to Joe Bag of Donuts' record, and let's say I want to schedule a call with him. Along the top of my ACT toolbar here, we have a few handy quick buttons for scheduling events. Call, meeting, and to do. They all perform very, very similar actions, nearly identical, with small distinctions between each. If I press call, this is how I'm going to schedule a call with Joe Bag of Donuts. This is actually a schedule call button. It doesn't actually call his phone. There is a way using the ACT dialer, if your phone is equipped to make voice over IP calls, that you could call his number from your computer, but that's not what this does. This call button schedules an activity. So when I push call, the schedule activity window appears. It has a drop down here saying activity type, and it already has call pre-selected for me. It has a start date. Maybe I want to call him on this Thursday. It has a time, 11 a.m., and it has a duration, 30 minutes. It also fills out the end date and end time, and if I were to choose different values in here, the duration automatically calculates for me. I can also, of course, manually type. If I wanted to make this go until exactly 2:17, it works it out for me as well. It shows that this call is scheduled with Joe Bag of Donuts. There's nothing that we need to do here in order to change the schedule with box. But if we want to include other people on this phone call, and again, this is just going on our own calendar with this schedule activity button, but if for our reference we want to add other users to the call, we can use this contacts dropdown, go to select contacts, and we can sort maybe by company or use the search bar here to find other users in the database that we'd like to add to this call. I can highlight their name and use the single arrow to move them over, and now they are in the selected contacts as part of this call. The double arrows will move everybody at once. The single arrows only move selected. I can optionally press this button to send an invitation email. What this is going to do is after I press the OK button, when I'm done here, it's going to create an Outlook invite for Joe Bag of Donuts and send it to as an Outlook calendar invite message to him. I will neglect to do that now, though. for this call. So we've got our activity type, a time and a duration, and now we need a regarding. The regarding field is your brief note. It's limited to about 255 characters, and you can type in what's this call about. Maybe it's just something brief, follow-up about request for quote. The Resources tab, it's rarely used, and so I'm not going to cover it today. You can use these Resources tab if maybe you are going, you have a company vehicle that you're going to be renting for this meeting, or you have shared resources. It's not often used, but if you have questions about that specifically, come talk to me. There's a location. This is handy to often fill out. If this is a phone call here, so the location is not really necessary. It's kind of assumed that it's going to be happening from your own desk. But if this was a meeting, maybe you'd want to fill in the contact's address or just say the bakery offices as a location. We really are done here, but we can fill out a few more optional fields. We can give the task a priority, high, medium, low. This is for your own organizational purposes, keeping your calendar straight. You can give your activity different colors for how it appears on your calendar. Maybe if this is something very important, you want to make it bright red. So I'll call it high priority and make it red. And you can also give yourself an alarm. And ACT has a built-in alarm system so that a pop-up message will come up in your ACT to let you know at a time interval before your meeting is to start or before your call is to start that you have it. Maybe we want to give ours a 30 minutes alert. If I press OK here, now where did that activity go? It's in a few different places. It's on Joe Bag of Donuts' Activities tab. There's an open activity here for him. It's on our calendar right here on Thursday, May 26th. It's in red, high priority task, Joe Bag of Donuts, follow up about quote. And it actually also puts it here onto my ACT task list. This is going to kind of look like a mess because this is a demo database and they have all sorts of junk in here I've never cleaned out. But if we were to look carefully, right around where would he be? Now it's in here somewhere. Oh, I'm still in 2015. Okay. Well, it's somewhere here in my task list as well, scrolling down to right here. The task list is the same as your calendar. Some of you might be wondering, what am I looking at here in the task list? These are all the same appointments that are on your calendar, but they're just in a list format. For some of you that might be more visual and like to look at your schedule on the calendar, seeing your week laid out, or some of you, like me, I kind of prefer my task list to be itemized items to check off here line by line of what I have to do to follow up. And I look at the times and dates this way to keep myself organized. You can use both, or you can use a combination or interchangeably, however you'd like. But we were successful. We made a call with Joe Bag of Donuts coming up this Thursday. Now let's do something again very similar, but we're going to change it a little bit. Let's say we want to make a meeting with him, but we don't want to schedule this meeting for ourselves. Maybe we want to schedule this meeting for someone else at our company. Well, I can go to Joe Bag of Donuts' record, and this time I'm going to say schedule a meeting. I see the same schedule activity window comes up. It's identical to the one that was there before. The only thing, I said there was a small nuance between call, meeting, and to-do, that they did the same thing that was a little different, is that it pre-selects which item is in this drop-down here for you. That's all. You can customize these items in here. I've seen people have custom activity types, invitations to bid and things like that they have as a custom activity, and you can pick those out as well. So we're going to say if we have a meeting to schedule for noon today for 2 hours with Joe, but this one's actually, I will say, regarding meeting about XYZ. We can use this Schedule For button to actually put this activity on another user's calendar in the database, somebody else at your company. Again, this demo database only has one user, so that doesn't really help us in this instance. But if there were 10 other users at my company, I'd be able to select and put this on one of their calendars for them. It's a good idea to also give them an alarm so that they know that you would put this on there for them. Connolly Sales asks a great question. How do we know to do this? How do we schedule for more than one person? The activity can only go on one ACT user's calendar at a time. It can either go on your own calendar or onto another ACT user's calendar. But if you want multiple people from your company also to join in on the meeting, I suggest that you schedule it on whoever you'd consider to be the primary account manager, the primary contact's calendar at your company, and then use the Schedule With button right here with Select Contacts to rope in other people from your company. So in our demo database here, we're from a fictional company called CH Tech 1 that ACT made up. And if we add in, maybe, I'm Chris Huffman here inside my demo database, and maybe if I want Allison and Melissa to come with me on this meeting, I can add them in this way to select the contacts and press OK. Now when the meeting is scheduled, it says it's scheduled with Joe, but he has a plus next to his name. If I look at the details of the meeting, I can see everyone associated. And if Allison and Melissa here were users of ACT, when they log in, this would be on their own calendar as well. Also, it would be a good idea to send an invitation email in this instance so that everybody could get that Outlook invite and make sure that they're aware of the meeting as well. There's these other tabs I didn't really cover up here. The regarding field I mentioned was limited to 255 characters about what your meeting or call or activity is in brief. The Details tab gives you unlimited type space, even with rich text formatting, colors, and you can paste in a whole book or email in here if you wanted to. The Recurrence allows you to schedule recurring meetings. If this is a monthly event or weekly meeting that happens, you have options for maybe this meeting happens every week on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And it's usually good to specify an end date. ACT sometimes runs into some troubles if you say no end date and it wants to synchronize with another calendar application, and you have activities that are recurring indefinitely. Sometimes I've seen that throw errors. But you can do recurring events here. Availability, this ties in with those Resources tab that I was talking about earlier, and I generally have people ignore the Availability tab. It's just very uncommonly used. It was a really noble idea that ACT had to create, and I've just seen it used maybe like once. So that's how we schedule activities on our calendar. We have our meeting, Joe Bag of Donuts, here on May 24th. We have our call with him here on Thursday. And now we get into some real bread and butter about ACT, about what we do to record what happens here at these meetings. Coming back to our Contacts tab, I mentioned how we should fill out fields as completely as possible whenever you're creating a new contact, but I did not yet address all of these different tabs along the bottom. We have here a Notes tab and a History tab. These are two of the most important and commonly used tabs in ACT. You'll be in these ones a lot, and I'm going to come back to those. We also have Activities, which I showed you. This will show any scheduled activities with Joe. We have Opportunities, which we will not be covering today, but we will be getting into those in another meeting, hopefully in about a month or two. Check the schedule that I typed up. We'll keep adding appointments to it. Opportunities allow you to track sales, leads, quotes, and activity and opportunities. Really, I hate to define a word using the definition here, but a sales opportunity that maybe you have with the customer. If they requested a quote, you could add it as an opportunity to help track upcoming sales forecasts. Groups and companies, it will show you which ACT groups this contact is a member of. Secondary contacts, I don't want to cover that today, nor relationships. The Documents tab. Documents allows you to attach files to any ACT record. If I wanted to attach a PDF to Joe's record, I can go to the Documents and say Add a File. And if I do this, it will allow me to pick any file off of my computer. It can be any media type. It can be an Excel sheet, a Word document, a PDF. If I pick something here, here's an image. Here's an image file that I attached to there, but this could be any type of document you can imagine. If you press the Add File button, it actually adds a copy of the file into your ACTS database files folder. It duplicates the file, and if you're a synchronizing database, it will sync it to the server. For those of you using ACT on a network, it will store a copy on the server. It's always best to attach the file itself as opposed to using the shortcut to file or shortcut options. Those ones work in much the same way, but instead of duplicating the file, they only make a reference to the file path on your own computer. And if you ever move or change or delete that file in the future and someone goes to try to open that, they might be hit with an error that the file is lost. But you can email this document as well. It will open an Outlook email to send the document away. Very useful stuff. For time's sake, I want to move back to notes and history here. I mentioned that these are your most commonly used tabs in ACT. So history is a record. It's a log of all interactions you've had with this particular contact. ACT will record things like emails sent out of Outlook if you have it configured that way. It will record all past scheduled activities, times the contact was created and updated, a log of all meetings and calls from all users going back in time. Every time you have an interaction with a contact, like the phone call that I scheduled with Joe Bag of Donuts or the meeting that I had, after that activity has happened and in the past, we want to put it in the history. This is a point I cannot stress enough. I know a lot of people improperly have been putting things in the notes as if they were histories. No, you want all of your interactions with a contact to go into the history tab. We'll see here in Chris's record some of the sample histories they have in here. Things like call completed, meeting not held, or meeting held, all other sorts of things like this. Vacation completed. They don't have very detailed stuff in here, being a demo database and all. But for those of you that are using the Outlook history integration, it will also show emails sent to the contact and what the email contents were. It will show email marketing blasts. It will show mail merge documents that were sent. The history is very valuable that I can pull up any record, any one of you folks that has done business with 12-3 in the past. I can go into our database and look at your history and see, the work that Jeff or Bob may have done with you 4 years ago and get totally up to speed on it. It's very useful to use it this way. So then people ask, what are the notes for then? Notes, yes, it will show e-marketing events as well. E-marketing campaigns sent out through the e-marketing tab in ACT. I do have a meeting in late June about ACT e-marketing. It's always a popular one that fills up. So if anybody's interested in seeing how to use ACT's free e-marketing platform, I highly recommend that you attend that meeting in June. But that is also recorded in ACT. Tom, your history is not being recorded automatically. I'll help you with that another time. We'll look into why that's happening. The notes, so if we have other information going into different fields throughout ACT, and you can make custom fields up here that fit your needs for your specific industry or business, and we have history of interactions going in the history tab, then what do we use in the notes? Well, I say everything else. They're kind of my wild card catch-all for anything, information that you want to keep about a contact that doesn't fit anywhere else. Sometimes I use notes for things like if I'm speaking to somebody and they just started a family. Maybe I'll make a note of that. Maybe when we're working on somebody's ACT server and we want to, in our company, make a note about what their server configuration settings are that we want to remember for the future. We'll throw that in a note. If you have any notes about they prefer that when you visit their office, use the side door. Notes are kind of your wild card for just everything else that doesn't fit into a specific field you have created or a history interaction. Notes are not to be used for saying, I called and left a voicemail for this person. That would be a history. So if we wanted to manually record a note, we can use this new note button here. It's a small icon. It's a notepad with a plus. There's also a larger button up here, the notepad with a plus. They do the exact same thing. If I make a new note, I can go ahead and I can add an attachment to it if I'd like. Oh, and I can type in the note details here in this field. Notes are unlimited in length if you wanted to attach in as much as you feel free. Press OK, and now the note is added on top for Chris Huffman's record. We can see Chris Huffman was the user that recorded it. You'll be able to see which user at your company recorded these notes, and it's shown in a preview panel over here as I click on the note. Under the History tab here, hold on, we have another question. Are there ways for received emails and calls to be automatically recorded? That's a great question, John. If you're using Gmail, there is a Gmail integration for ACT that works. You know, it's kind of fragile at times, but Gmail history recording will record sent and received. If you're using Outlook through your company email, no, received emails are not recorded automatically. Sent emails are recorded automatically, but received ones are not. There is a way to manually attach received emails to an ACT contact, and I'm going to have a meeting about Outlook and ACT integration where we'll cover that more in depth. But to tell you in brief, if you look at your Outlook, you might have an add-ins tab at the top of your Outlook with ACT add-ins. If you highlight an email message and press the Quick Attach button on your add-ins tab in Outlook, that will attach the email back to ACT. Also been asked, what if you move the file folder location on our network? Will the link in ACT break? I assume that you're talking in regards to documents. If you attach a document here into ACT and you use the Add File button, it's actually going to store the file itself in your ACT database files folder on your network. It stores a copy of it, so no, the file references never go invalid unless you start really moving around your database files location folder. I highly advise against that because you're probably going to end up, you know, corrupting the database if you do. There are ways to move it. There's more steps involved. But if you attach documents to your notes and history, they are saved as a duplicate copy onto the server. If you use only the attach shortcut option, then the link can get removed. So recording notes is straightforward enough. Back on track here, we use the Insert Note button. If we want to record manually a history, I can use the New History button. It's this rewind clock looking thing here. There's also the same button down here. And if I click this one, I get a similar panel to the notes. I can say what type of history this was. Maybe this was a phone call. I can say the result. I didn't get in touch. I left a message. And I can say, you know, a time and a duration regarding left voicemail about quote, as well as some details. And I can schedule that, and that makes a new history record here. Let's do the same thing again, but this time, if I was calling and leaving a message, I could say left voicemail about, quote, again. There's also a handy follow-up button. And if I click follow-up, it brings me to my schedule activity panel, which we saw earlier, where I can, you know, quickly schedule here. I want to call them again tomorrow morning regarding follow-up with quote. Throw that onto my calendar really quickly as a follow-up message, and then finish recording my history. That's a custom billing application we have there. You can ignore that error. That was that's something that would be relevant if I was in my own 12.3 database, not in the demo. But that's how we can manually record history. And now I'm going to tie this all together. I know we're coming up at 10 o'clock here, so we're only a couple minutes from the end. I want to talk about how we don't need to manually record histories like this every time, because we already did the work of putting the phone calls and meetings on our calendar. And this is where all of ACT kind of comes around full circle and helps everything fit together like a big jigsaw puzzle. When you have other traditional calendar applications, like Outlook, for instance, and you schedule something on your calendar, well, there it is. but then the time goes on. The meeting either happens or it doesn't. Wednesday passes, so does Thursday and Friday. And if you go back and look at your calendar from last September, the events are still on there. You don't have to clear them or erase them. The events just happen and they help you at the time, and then they move into the past. And if you were to go look at an Outlook calendar from September, it's hard to say with definitive certainty what was the result of all these different meetings that I had. It's hard to say that with definitive certainty from last week in some cases. In ACT, we do things a little bit differently. We clear off activities as they're completed. Those of you who've been using ACT for a long time, maybe you've noticed this, and this is something that a lot of people have not caught up on. There is a small checkbox in this right sidebar next to each event. That same checkbox is on the Activities tab next to each event. And there's that checkbox here on the task list, whose icon is a checkbox itself. And there's this checkbox all the way down the side for each activity. And the reason that exists is because if you look at an activity and you use the checkbox to clear it off, the Clear Activity dialog appears. I can clear it off and just press check mark and say OK. The activity is scratched off. If I go back to Joe's record here in ACT, quick note, because I didn't cover that, there's a fast lookup box over here. I just did a lookup on contact, contains, Baga, and found Joe Bagadonis' record. But you can look up company, state, all sorts of lookups in ACT. But anyways, I crossed off his activity by crossing it off the checklist, and it put it into the history for me. Let's show that again. If I wanted to cross off this activity that's happening on Thursday, you know, in practice, I'm sure I wouldn't be doing this until Thursday afternoon, but if I check off the box, the Clear Activity window appears. It puts in the current date and time. It has results. The call was completed. Or I can say maybe the call was not completed. Maybe the call was attempted, or I had to leave a voicemail. I have my follow-up button again for scheduling a future activity. I have details, but I can go ahead and clear that off. And so this is sometimes where I hope a lot of you can see the light. Some of you may look at your task list and see a scenario like Chris Huffman has going on here. Pardon me. Where we see all sorts of tasks that have never been cleared. Some of you may laugh at that, but fear not. You could go through and clear these one at a time and keep crossing these off your task list, or you can use the Shift key to select multiple all at once. Maybe I want to select all the ones going all the way up until about April here. And I can say clear multiple activities and clear all of these off for those of you that maybe were never clearing these in the past. This is going to add all of the activity details into history. It's also worth mentioning that clearing an activity is not the same as erasing it. If you right-click on activities in ACT or look around carefully, you'll see the option to erase them. Erasing them is to delete the whole thing without a trace that it ever happened. To clear it is to check off that box and say that it was completed and that the activity was done. And it's really useful because then as I look back in my historical calendar of events, you know, we have everything is crossed off. Looking at any one of these contacts' individual records, I'll see it into the history. When I'm clearing activities, I can schedule follow-ups for the future. And this is how it all fits together full circle. Use ACT as your calendar. If I can depart with nothing else today and no other knowledge for you guys, please just be using ACT as your calendar. Hopefully this is insightful for you. And I will open the floor to some questions now. Jim has asked, will I post this for future viewing? I will. This is being recorded and it's going to be up on YouTube hopefully by the end of the day. Our YouTube channel, easy to find. If I go into Chrome here, YouTube's not hard to use, but YouTube, 12-3 marketing. It comes up with all of our videos below here, but you can look at my channel page and see all of the videos we've posted in a different spot. And this is where you will find all of our past virtual user groups meetings.
Stephen, does the calendar sync with Google, with Gmail Calendar?
It does. It's something that I didn't cover too much at all today, but if you're interested, if you go under Tools and Integrate with Google, there are Google integration preferences here. And you can synchronize your calendar with Google, and this is actually the topic of, I believe I have next week is scheduled for using Google or using ACT on a mobile device. I was going to cover Google integration at one point in there because some people like to synchronize their ACT calendar with a Google calendar, and using Google as the middleman, your phone can put your Google calendar onto your phone, and therefore you kind of have a three-way sync going between there. ACT going to Google, and then the Google calendar being on your phone helps people out. Don't want to get into the details here, but if you're interested, go into your Google integration preferences and you can set that up. You can synchronize your calendar, contacts, and history reporting independently of each other. All right, any other questions? I hope everybody was able to find this useful today, and I will see you next week for talking about getting ACT onto your mobile phones. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.